The second is the right, if again we can so bowdlerize that word, of a man to refuse to undertake the appropriate tests to determine whether indeed he is the father of a child. And I wish to secure the Prime Minister's assurance that there is a higher right in each case, and that is for the innocent child to know who their mother and father is, and to inquire whether the legislative intent of the government is to make refusal to do everything possible to assure and to ensure the proper naming of mother and father will become offenses punishable under law.
Mr. Speaker, it is not my intention to debate the bills and the possible amendments today. Suffice to say that my personal view matches yours, but then as legislators, it is the body of the Parliament that will make the decision. So member from Central Kingston, I believe if the majority of us feel this way, then that will be the outcome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Mr. Speaker, on the public business, we'll continue debate on private members' motion number 11, and the Minister of Health will make his contribution.
Mr. Speaker, permission to speak from a seat other than my own.
You may go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, let me thank the member from Central Kingston for raising this very important issue on tobacco control. And I think I can, on behalf of this side of the House, apologize for the late response in terms of continuation to final completion of the discussion. Mr. Speaker, the impact of smoking and other tobacco use on chronic disease is well documented. Worldwide, over 1 billion people currently use tobacco, mostly in the form of cigarettes, and 7 million, Mr. Speaker, die each year, with 80% of these tobacco-related deaths occurring in developing countries. Mr. Speaker, in the epidemiology of tobacco use among young people in the United States and worldwide, this is a publication by the Center for Disease Control, 88% of adult smokers who smoke daily report that they started smoking in their teenage years. Mr. Speaker, the adolescent period, therefore, is a time of great susceptibility to social influences presented through the marketing of products, peer group interaction, and of behavior exhibited by role models. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with the aim to stem the resulting health and economic consequences, primarily prevention strategies are focused on youth and young adults to drastically lower youth initiation and the use of substance abuse, not just, by the way, in terms of tobacco, but also in terms of alcohol, marijuana, just to name two of the more popular ones. Mr. Speaker, the WHO framework, by way of context again, the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, FCTC, was a global response to the globalization of the tobacco epidemic. Jamaica signed on September 24, 2003, and ratified on October 5, 2005, grounded in the Public Health Act. The Act, the Public Health Tobacco Control Regulations, was promulgated and came into effect on July 15, 2013. A comprehensive, Mr. Speaker, tobacco control bill has been developed and is under review currently. However, based on the multi-sectorial nature of the bill and the time involved in legislative development process, regulations were promulgated in 2013 under the Public Health Act.
The Minister is speaking and he's being disturbed by everybody doing everything else other than giving him time to make his presentation. Minister, please proceed.
Thank you for your support, Mr. Speaker. Where was I? So I was saying that a comprehensive tobacco bill has been developed and under review. However, given the multi-sectorial nature of the bill and the time involved in legislative development process, regulations were promulgated in 2013 under the Public Health Act. This was done, Mr. Speaker, as an interim measure to uphold its obligations pending the development and finalization of a comprehensive tobacco control bill. The comprehensive legislation seeks to address, Mr. Speaker, colleagues, critical articles which have not been addressed under the existing tobacco control regulations. And these include to regulate the interaction of government officials with the tobacco industry and to ensure that government bodies only interact with the tobacco industry only when and to the extent when it is strictly necessary to ensure them to effectively regulate the industry. Secondly, to regulate price and tax measures in a manner that will effectively contribute to the reduction of tobacco consumption. Next, testing and measurement of the contents and emissions of tobacco products and provisions for the disclosure of toxic substances to the public. Next, full prohibition on tobacco advertising, promotion and sponsorship, and including a ban on point-of-sale tobacco displays. This, Mr. Speaker, will bring us closer to the concept of plain packaging. I continue, Mr. Speaker, to outline some of the critical features of the legislation. Jamaica's commitment will continue to eliminate all forms of illicit trade in tobacco products, and this clearly is a multi-portfolio initiative involving customs, law enforcement, etc. And finally, just to name some of the critical components of the legislation to come: prohibit sales of all forms of tobacco products to and by minors. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the Child Care and Protection Act, CCPA, does not prohibit the sale of tobacco products in general, including electronic nicotine delivery systems, to and by minors. The current provision restrictively references cigarettes, cigars, among others, and we recognize, however, that attempts were being made by the Office of the Children's Advocate to amend the CCPA to accord with the FCTC requirements. This we intend to address with in the legislation to come. Mr. Speaker, I can unequivocally, I can state categorically that the government is committed to the translation of the FCTC into effect, national implementation of the treaty. Therefore, priority areas for the government includes full implementation of a comprehensive ban on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, enacting a comprehensive tobacco control legislation, and reducing demand on tobacco products through increased taxes. Multi-sectoral collaboration, Mr. Speaker, are underway in reviewing and developing the draft bill. In fact, we have completed the sectoral consultation, and as we speak, a report is being drafted to be submitted to each of the portfolio ministries, the relevant ministries, for their final comment, at which point we'll head to Cabinet for approval on the way forward. The Ministry of Health has engaged the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to lead the process, which involves deliberations among legal personnel from the various ministries. The ministry, again, is currently developing the Cabinet submission in relation to this legislation. In the meantime, current informational and social marketing campaign efforts to reduce both initiation and prevalence of tobacco use include, Mr. Speaker, the HYPE program, which is an island-wide tour in schools, tobacco control being one of the priority interventions, the annual participation in World Tobacco Day, celebrated on May 31st, 2017 this year, which includes a major campaign to involve particularly the younger population in schools to look at the threat and to discourage tobacco use. The READ program, Resistance Education Against Drugs, a program designed for students as an indigenous response to our Jamaican reality of a cultural acceptance of drug use. Selection for participation, Mr. Speaker, is based on students that belong to a group that have a high risk for substance abuse. And the STRIVE program, this is an NCDA selective prevention program that is designed to increase knowledge of the consequences of substance abuse, which focuses on building life skills, including resistance and problem-solving mechanism. Mr. Speaker, in terms of a public education campaign, it is also irrefutable that sustained efforts are needed for behavioral change. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, as part of our larger social intervention initiative, a national communication campaign will be rolled out this fiscal year with a focus on raising awareness about the harmful effects of tobacco, as we fully commit the necessary resources consistently and aggressively to making our youth, as well as future generations, tobacco-free. I want to mention briefly, Mr. Speaker, colleagues, on the issue of cannabis or marijuana usage. As it relates to cannabis, Mr. Speaker, the Dangerous Drugs Act 2015 was passed to provide, or the amendment was passed to provide for, among other things, the modification of penalties for the possession of cannabis in specified small quantities and the smoking of cannabis in specified circumstances, and for a scheme of licenses, permits, and other authorizations for medicinal, therapeutic, or scientific purposes. This amendment has been referred to, of course, as the decriminalization of cannabis. Reports, Mr. Speaker, from key stakeholders in law enforcement, education, and health sector have been consistent regarding public perception of the recent amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act. The perception, particularly among our young people, is that cannabis is now a legal drug to be used at leisure regardless of location, age, quantity, and context. And that, Mr. Speaker, for us is quite unfortunate, and indeed we consider to be very much against the interests of public health. Locally, the impact of cannabis on cognitive functioning, including memory, along with the existing challenges with education, literacy in school children, and the increased prevalence of cannabis use and misuse by Jamaican adolescents, is a major concern, such as incidents of drugged driving, not drunk driving, but drugged driving, dangerous and harmful reactions to the consumption, including of cannabis edibles. There are edibles, Mr. Speaker, cookies, sweets, and we have evidence of that from our public health officials, present in the Jamaican context, edibles in the Jamaican context, some being sold within prominent schools. Mr. Speaker, a study by Professor Archibald MacDonald examining trauma injuries presented at the University Hospital showed that 46% of patients were positive for cannabis, while 50% and 55% of victims of road traffic accidents and personal violence, respectively, were tested positive for cannabis. And this is by the current principal and an expert in trauma at the University of the West Indies, Professor Archibald McDonough. Well, sorry? I don't have those numbers, but I can get that. Within the general population, Mr. Speaker, let me just say that I have had discussions with other professionals. Professor Wendell Abel, for example, I'm sure he wouldn't mind my referencing him, who is not totally against, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, the use of marijuana for certain purposes, but has stated very clearly that as it relates to the edibles, he has actually been testing, once it's discovered, the impact of marijuana edibles on our young adolescent population, particularly our schoolers who are involved in that type of consumption. And he advises that it has wreaked havoc on that population who have opted for that particular choice. So it's something that we in public health are very concerned about and need to pay particular attention to. Within the general population, Mr. Speaker, a drug prevalence survey conducted by the NCDA in 2016 among 4,623 individuals island-wide revealed that 28% of the population 12 to 65 years old had used cannabis at some point in their lifetime, and 18% used in the past year, with the average age of first use being 16 years old. 1 in 4 individuals reported using cannabis in drinks, while just over 7% reported using edibles. That is in food, cannabis in food items. Over 70% of the population, Mr. Speaker, reported having easy access, of course, to cannabis, which I think this House is fully aware of. Mr. Speaker, there has been much public discussion about the implications of the new legislation and much misinformation surrounding its provisions. Nevertheless, as we welcome the paradigm shift on one hand, there is also the question of enforcement of the law on the other. The lack of enforcement of laws concerning possession and smoking of cannabis will lead, Mr. Speaker, from a public health perspective, in our opinion, to a breakdown in law and order and deterioration of non-smokers' rights to enjoy a smoke-free environment, especially in public spaces. Indeed, appropriate regulations must focus on protecting public health. Policy structures must be based on the need to keep harm to a minimum and should be guided, we believe, by what the science concludes. Mr. Speaker, the consensus is that a public education strategy is urgently required to address the implications of these changes for various groups in our society, especially targeting our young people. Therefore, the National Council on Drug Abuse, NCDA, will be embarking on a full-scale youth public education campaign to delay initiation into smoking and to provide our young people with information about healthy coping and lifestyle options. In fact, we are well advanced in completing that public education program, and the Ministry of Health has allocated some $50 million over a period of time to supporting that. So we are getting back into that after a long break since the law was first introduced. The campaign will build on the Youth Talk the Truth and hashtag Future Come First prevention program that is owned by the NCDA. Mr. Speaker, this campaign will be implemented over a 2-year period, then evaluated and adjustments made to the main promotional messages if necessary. A defining feature of this campaign is the integration of peer and family support strategies to support and maintain behavioral change. Mr. Speaker, finally, at the 140th session of the Executive Board of the World Health Organization, WHO, in Geneva, Switzerland, Jamaica, through the Ministry of Health, led by myself, and supported by the team, including the Chief Medical Officer, signal its readiness to support and participate in the WHO's planned review of the United Nations classification and governance of cannabis. This review, Mr. Speaker, should enable the removal of cannabis from its current classification as a Schedule 1 drug deemed to have no medicinal benefits to another schedule which reflects its important potential for medicinal use. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health supports the use, and this is very important to be clear, the use of extracts in varied CBD and THC concentrations containing cannabis products for research and medicinal purposes, where there is scientific evidence for the use of these substances for specific conditions. There are, however, grave misperceptions about the recreational use of cannabis and its potential health effects. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health does not support the recreational use of cannabis or any form of smoked cannabis products, even for medicinal use, as smoking anything at all, as far as we are concerned, as far as the science support, is hazardous to one's health. Mr. Speaker, the Health Subcommittee of the Cannabis Licensing Authority, which is chaired by the Chief Medical Officer, is working on the following initiatives. Firstly, ethical guidelines for medicinal cannabis research, which are presently being crafted by a consultant and collaboratively funded by the CLA and the Jamaica Promotions Corporation, JAMPRO. Secondly, medicinal cannabis cards. These have been designed for use by persons with evidence that they are using cannabis for medicinal purposes. Thirdly, a mandatory continuing medical education training program for physicians registered in Jamaica who will be prescribing recommended medicinal cannabis for patients, as well as training for others in the industry. And in fact, that training has in fact commenced. The first batch of physicians have started. I understand that a batch of about 70 physicians, and that will be ramped up. And in fact, the pharmacists have also expressed an interest in going through that training, and we will make the necessary provisions to provide that support to them. And fourthly, the registration of cannabis products. Interestingly, today we had a subcommittee meeting looking at cannabis, chaired by my colleague from Central Clarendon, and it was revealed that there are seven or eight registered products by the Ministry of Health containing extracts from cannabis that can now be legally traded and used in Jamaica. 4 of the 7 are by a local company, for medicinal use, and 3 by a foreign company. So we are making progress on the medicinal side and slowly trying to build out an industry as it relates to cannabis. However, we have to be cautious based on the science, based on the evidence, that there are pitfalls, dangers, and we have to do it in the interest of public health. And we're committed to that. Mr. Speaker, colleagues, I thank you.
Dr. Ferguson.
Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues in this debate on this most important motion, which appears at number 11 on the paper. Mr. Speaker, I support the presentation made by the Minister of Health in relation to the critical importance of Jamaica paying special attention to the use of tobacco and the use of marijuana. But in particular, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to put in context, why is it so important for us to pay attention to the ill effects of tobacco or marijuana. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, it is part of our overall strategy in relation to dealing with the risk factors which are involved in the non-communicable diseases that 70% of Jamaican adults each year are dying from the non-communicable diseases, namely the diabetes, the high blood pressure, the cancers, etc. But in fact, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, at the National Chest Hospital, 70% of persons who die from cancer is directly related to smoking. 70%. And in fact, for all the cancer cases, 90% are chronic smokers. So the evidence is overwhelming. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is impatient of debate that we should really continue to push for the comprehensive bill which the Minister has enunciated on, but in particular Article 13, which deals with tobacco advertising, promotion and sponsorship. Article 15 that speaks to illicit trade. That is also critical. And Article 5.3 that we have ignored as political leaders and public officials in relation to the relationship with the tobacco industry. I believe we have done very well, and this administration has continued a process moving in a positive direction in relation to Article 6, which has to do with the taxation on tobacco, which you have raised in the last year and again this year, and in 2015 it also went up. So we are moving in the right direction. The comprehensive bill, however, Mr. Speaker, we have to put a little pressure on that, because when I left the ministry in November 2015, we had already completed the work relative to the multi-sectoral groupings and the findings for that comprehensive bill. What we need now is the political will to take it to the next level, because Jamaica is a signatory and we have ratified in 2005 the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And therefore, against that background, the industry from time to time tries to give an impression as if it's not legally binding, that treaty, but it's an international legally binding treaty. I'm very happy to hear the Minister speaking to the issue of public education, because again, public education is going to make a major, major difference in relation to the regulations of 2013, which some persons are now ignoring in the public space, which would have banned smoking in all indoor places, places where children play, schools, health facilities, public convenience, etc. And therefore, what is needed, and I use this opportunity to call on the law enforcement officers, our police, to begin to enforce the regulations. And there are some persons and businesses that operate as sacred cows. And I believe we must, as a country, recognizing the value of this legislation and that which is to come, that we must enforce, because there are places operating uptown and downtown where persons are still smoking, which is infringing on the rights of citizens who are non-smokers. And therefore, I am making this call that we, the security force and the police in particular, must now take seriously the enforcement of the regulation. I'm happy that the government and the opposition are on the same page as it relates to cannabis and marijuana. Medical marijuana, medicinal marijuana, we are 100% for. Where we have issue has to do with the recreational use, especially with our children, because that is where we have the real issues, and that is where you're seeing the cases growing in our public institutions, in our schools, etc. We are seeing a number of children since the amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act. There's one point I want to make, though, however, that in relation to the amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act, I remember very well that Cabinet was careful that in relation to smoking marijuana in public places, that too would come under the regulations in relation to tobacco, the same. So it's not supposed to be where you don't smoke cigarette, but you can smoke marijuana in public place. No. There were special provisions in that amendment to, yes, no, I'm just saying, making the point that it is a fact that persons have not taken on board. They believe that with ganja, there's no restriction. It's sacred. And I'm just making the point that when the bill was amended, that was taken on board. But I really want to congratulate the member from Kingston Central who brought this motion to the House and the contribution, wonderful contribution made by the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues, my intervention is trying to hope to put some perspective to some of these and the action being taken by the Prime Minister and the government to address this more in its entirety. History will show that, of course, the very aspect of combining tobacco and marijuana speaks to the fact that one is an illegal drug under our system, namely marijuana, and therefore falls under the Dangerous Drugs Act, as against tobacco, which of course was foisted on the world across the globe on a planned basis of increasing the use of tobacco, and therefore tobacco control and marijuana are now becoming synonymous in our jurisdiction. I'm not going to prolong the debate because the crossover relates to the fact that I should bring Parliament up to date, and I have one, in the action being taken by the government on this matter, which now relates to an industry. For instance, the using of cannabis is tied very much to the medicinal aspect. Where is ganja? Where is marijuana? Is it much the same? Because you're speaking of the issues that relate to what makes one the other. So I'm not going to prolong it except to say that basically the importance here is to recognize that it's an industry now. Most of us might be surprised to learn that if you are looking at it from the marijuana ganja concept, Las Vegas is shorter than ganja right now. That is the most careful fact in relation to the Americans dealing with the challenge of what is a drug and how it relates to each state as it relates to the country at large. So I'm not going to prolong this, as the issue that I really wish to address is I happen to be appointed the chairman of an ad hoc committee of cabinet, which is looking at this from all the angles. Health is merely one angle. Education is another. The industry that relates to the handling of money, etc. All these are issues which the cabinet has asked the subcommittee of the cabinet to explore and bring back the issues that relate. My colleague mentioned the fact that each ministry is making a... What will come? ultimately everything will come to Parliament, but I think that's why I'm seizing the opportunity, because my colleague mentioned the fact that the Ministry of Health made a very comprehensive report to that committee this morning, and I have to compliment him on the work being done by the Ministry of Health. Where that impacts on us is that in some of the jurisdictions of the world, here in Jamaica, we inherited the fact that the CLA is who licenses people in every way. The Ministry of Health, however, has to license those who dispense it. And therefore, in some countries, the Ministry of Health is responsible for issuing these licenses, whether they're for the exporters, importers, medical or otherwise. And I could go on, because we have been in meetings where everyone comes to present their position, from the religious to those in the visitor industry, for instance, and to the ultimate Ministry of Health, which came this morning. And therefore, the government and cabinet is to receive a report. I believe the Prime Minister ordered it recently to be as quickly done as possible, that we can bridge all these gaps. Because we must remember in our minds, by the failure of our founding fathers to identify the use of marijuana as a product that was used by an indigenous set of people called the Rastafarians, we made it, the hemp plant, totally illegal. Therefore, in all of our minds, it is a drug. Now, that extent to which alcohol is a drug, to the extent to others, are for others to explain. The position that I think the government is responsible for is to bring all these things together. Because, as I said, you have persons who have been living illegally growing, who now have to be brought into the system. And therefore, I want to compliment the Prime Minister having appointed that, and my colleagues. And that committee has to report where the wider issues have to be addressed by Parliament. The timeline, I think the Prime Minister gave me a timeline just on Monday that by the end of September I should pursue and finish what the ad hoc committee is doing. That therefore other ministries will now come to speak to the areas that are complex aspects of this issue, which is very, very indigenous to Jamaica and important to the world. And certainly, the charge that I'm given is to recognize that health, education are in the forefront of what must guide the decision that we make as a government in terms of this issue, and not perhaps bypass the issues that relate. Because I can remember my colleague, ganja was not totally involved in what we were told as tobacco control and smoking. And indeed, the indigenous aspect of our life and way, we've all been seeing ganja being smoked, breaking all the laws everywhere in the country, very little action being taken. So let's try and make sure we make the right decisions in arriving at the industry of marijuana, ganja, and cannabis.
Go ahead, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll be very brief. But I couldn't allow the opportunity to pass without saying that I support the presentation made by the Minister of Health. This issue of tobacco and marijuana is something that I have spoken in this House before about, and it is one that I continue to support, and I'm happy for the courage that he's displaying in speaking to the issue in a frank way, and I offer him my full support. The studies that he spoke to are indeed real. I have reviewed them myself. There's even another study that showed that 100% of the youngsters who are at the detox unit, 100% of them, they found that they had somehow consumed marijuana. And I think Dr. Delahaye and other persons, Abel and other persons at the university that were at the university at that time can brief him as to those studies. There is this issue where every time that you speak about marijuana, that an argument is given that it is an industry. And I don't think that anybody is arguing whether or not there is an industry for it. What is clear, though, is that there is a public health concern. and that cannot be ignored in your pursuance of this industry. It is well documented as to the adverse effects of smoking in general and smoking marijuana. And so I fully agree that we should pursue this industry now. And I think somewhere along the line, those views may have even been misinterpreted. But I fully agree that an industry, a viable industry, is there. But the fact of the matter is that that industry has to be pursued with the public health concerns at the forefront. If you look at Alexander Fleming when he was developing penicillin, it comes from a mold. It's from the mold, you know. He was doing his experiment and the mold was there, and he realized that in his petri dish that he was getting a reaction and that it was treating the microbes. No, but nobody out there, and penicillin is a very good antibiotic, a broad spectrum antibiotic, but nobody out there goes and takes up the mold and consumes it. People use the augmentin, the penicillin-based antibiotic. They don't consume the mold. It's the same thing with the marijuana. You have to extract that which is beneficial from the plant and have some regulated way in how much you're administering to an individual. And all of those things like any other medication, because all medications come with side effects. And I think that especially the deleterious effect on the developing brain is something that has to stay at the forefront of the discussion. The two areas of concern, though, Minister, would be in relation to the adherence to the regulations for the tobacco. I thought it was very good to do the regulations, but I don't get the impression from what I've seen that the necessary enforcement is being done to prevent the smoking in these public spaces. And the right of an individual to smoke could never circumvent my right to life, because the impact of secondhand smoking, again, is something that is well documented. And I think that we have a duty of care to those persons to ensure that we protect them. And the final area is in relation to the graphic health warnings to be placed on the smoking products. I think the last time we were a little bit timid in going the full way, in the full approval as to the effect. 75%, I think when you go down to New Zealand, Australia, and those places, is what is prescribed and is the most efficacious, is the most effective that you can get, is when you have graphic health warning of about 75%. I think we had agreed to either 50% or less. Right. So you need to look to see if we can increase that to about 75, because that again is well documented, that when those graphic health warnings that are 75%, you get more persons quitting cigarette smoking from viewing the images on the boxes. So that's pretty much it, Mr. Speaker. I support the presentation as well.
Mr. Bunting.
Mr. Speaker, I just have one short intervention on this matter. And that is, I am alarmed as I move around, particularly in the rural areas. And this is a matter that should be of concern not just to the Minister of Health, but the Minister of Finance, is the amount of contraband cigarettes that I see being sold in the rural area. In fact, it is now more prolific than the official cigarette brands which you are collecting tax on. A wide variety. When you look on the markings on the packs, they have nothing to do with any of the required regulations. It doesn't identify who the manufacturer is, anything. So it is uncustomed for sure. It is unregulated, and we have no idea what is in these cigarettes. and the packs are designed to be similar to some of the well-known brands of cigarettes. Just at a glance, you will see one with a camel on it, for example. There's one that resembles Rothmans in terms of colorings and various things. But upon closer examination, you will see that they're not. There are some that apparently are copying Chinese brands of cigarettes. And it is clear that because a high percentage, and maybe the Minister of Finance could help me, but I know a high percentage of the price of a pack of cigarettes is the various taxes, the special consumption tax, etc. So it is extremely profitable for organized crime to smuggle either just straight contraband cigarettes or counterfeit. They pay nothing. It sells just below the price of the regular cigarettes. So the margins are huge. And this is undoubtedly not only putting our population at risk, but one of the things fueling organized crime in Jamaica and corrupting the customs and the whole regulatory system. So, Mr. Speaker, I couldn't let this opportunity, because it's something I've been noticing recently in the past few weeks. It is, there's a proliferation of these illegal cigarettes, particularly in the rural areas. Clarendon, Manchester, I'm seeing it a lot in the center of the island. And if we don't, we can be here talking about the health effects of those that are regulated, but these are completely illegal and outside the system, and we don't know what the contents are. We certainly not collecting any revenues from them, and somebody is making a lot of money in this industry, and I think it needs urgent attention. Both my remarks directed both to the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Health. Thank you.
Sir. Use your mic there. Use your mic, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the motion, but I would also like to know what is the collaborative approach between the Minister of Health and the Minister of Education as it relates to the use of marijuana smoking in school, because since that aspect there, we have seen a rise, a proliferation of young youths smoking ganja in open spaces on the school premises. What is being done to educate, or what will be done to educate the youths as relates to prohibiting them from smoking in school spaces?
Mr. Tufton, that question was asked of you. You're asking the
Mr. Speaker, the standing order
motion
doesn't permit a member to ask a question like that. It's a private member's motion. What he can do is to make a contribution, so the minister cannot respond to him. The motion is in the name of the member from Central Kingston.
Thank you for advising me. The member recognizing the Minister of Health and recognizing the role he plays in this health proposal has asked a question, and he's going to ask the proposer of the resolution, who supported it some time ago in this House, to answer those questions. Mr. Thwaite.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who has participated in this debate. Sir, I feel in this Parliament we sometimes, indeed all the time, undervalue the importance of discourse and action on so-called social issues. We can greatly improve the quality of life of our people in ways other than those which require the expenditure of large sums of money. And it is the business of representatives of the people to inquire into issues of relationship, of lifestyle, and of culture in ways which can improve the condition of life. And no issue could be more significant than the health of the country, and in this particular instance, the impact of it on tobacco and marijuana use indiscriminately. I'd like to pay tribute to the member from East St. Thomas, who has really been the pioneer in encouraging the adoption by Jamaica of the appropriate protocols preventing the spread of tobacco. And I recall, Mr. Speaker, the blowback, the tremendous opposition that he received, not in this Parliament, but from vested interests in the society who feel that their profit and their riches were somehow connected with the purveying of this poison, particularly for our young people. And I commend him for his strength in this regard. I'm also very grateful, and so should all Jamaica be, to the comprehensive statement made by the Minister of Health in this instance. For the first time, this Parliament has stated and heard and will affirm that unequivocally that smoking anything is harmful to your health. It is important that we should set standards of that nature, not take them for granted, but state them clearly. We can indicate to people how it is that we see things based upon the science, based upon the reflection that the Minister of Health was able to offer in this regard. And I'm also grateful to the contribution of the member from St. Anne Northwest and the particular nuance that he gave from his professional knowledge. The situation that the member for Central Manchester exposed is a great risk, both to the revenue and also to the health of our people. I wish I had known the issue was going to come up today, because I myself have seen packages which are pictured where the writing is in some foreign language, and which is sold at a considerable discount to what cigarettes are normally to be purchased for. And I really wonder how porous our customs is, what kind of illicit importation is happening. If in that, what about something else, anything else that causes this leakage of revenue and this exposure of our people? In the 55th year of our independence, Mr. Speaker, when we are expending so much emotional and other energies to celebrate our freedom, how can we be satisfied that after all the expenditure on port security and everything else, illicit products, harmful products, can be so ubiquitous around our country? It is a matter that requires very urgent attention. Mr. Speaker, we will remind the government of the public education program that has been announced, and I'm very grateful that a significant sum, such as $50 million, has been earmarked for this over a period of time. And we should all encourage this to be expended and to be carried out in the most efficient way possible. Mr. Speaker, the member for Central Clarendon was very helpful in pointing out how broadly based the approach to the control of dangerous smoking habits has to be. I don't think because the use of marijuana is indigenous that can take away at all from its danger when it is used, particularly by developing minds, by teenagers particularly. Mr. Speaker, I have come across drivers of 18-wheel truck trailers, seen them in this country with a spliff in their mouth. That can't be helpful. That can't be right. Drug driving has to be seen as an offense, which is punishable. I have spoken with minibus drivers on their third trip in from Sablamar for the day, who feel that the only way they can do it is if they have a combination of marijuana and boom, or such other stimulant. This is the kind of problem that we are facing unless we take very definite steps in this regard. We must avoid the inducement to our young people to tobacco use particularly. I'm aware of young people who went to a well-advertised party recently, as young people will, and they are offered cigarettes free. Offered cigarettes free, and the consequence to many is that they accept it, they think it is socially acceptable and advantageous, and they end up addicted. Mr. Speaker, there's one challenge and hope that I wish to commend to the Minister of Health. One of the things that we don't have in this country sufficiently in the public health system is provisions to help people who are addicted to tobacco or marijuana to rescue themselves. The Seventh-day Adventist Church used to be very helpful in this regard. I don't know how universal their programs are, but may I commend to him the need in most of our public health facilities to ensure that there is a way in which persons who are addicted to tobacco, I'm told it is a very, very difficult thing to escape. And we need all the best science and the best assistance to help people in this regard. All in all, Mr. Speaker, I think this debate has been helpful, and I think I can say that all of the recommendations that have been made in the original resolution have been spoken to, and the commitments made. And the fact that we speak as one in this regard is exemplary. I do thank the members and your good self, sir, for this indulgence.
The question is, members, members, because of the importance of this resolution, I want to express my serious concern that I'm not able to contribute from the floor on this matter, since I was one of the members of this House who warned you when you were here freeing up ganja, that it was going to destroy our schools. So at a time when I get a chance to do so, I had named myself the warner man. I now put the resolution. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Local Government knows take the Local Governance Amendment number 2, Act 2017.
Minister Mackenzie.
I beg to move for suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the bill, Mr. Speaker, to take notice of second reading of the bill.
Those in favor? Those against? As of it.
A bill shortly entitled the Local Governance Amendment Number 2, Act 2017, read a first time.
Let us listen and participate.
Mr. Speaker, this short, very short, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to have the second reading of the bill.
He has given notice. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for notice of second reading the bill.
Okay.
the Local Governance Amendment number 2, Bill 2017, is intended to allow adequate recess period for the municipal corporations across the island during the month of August. Over the years, Mr. Speaker, the municipal councils usually suspend their monthly meetings for the month of August by virtue of resolutions passed by the respective municipal corporations indicating that they intend to go on recess for the month of August. The resolution, Mr. Speaker, would be sent to the ministry for notification. However, Mr. Speaker, this practice was not consistent with the law. And in this regard, this bill seeks to amend Section 32 of the Local Governance Act, which currently requires the municipal corporations to hold monthly meetings. This amendment will exclude the month of August from this requirement to hold monthly meeting. The result is that this will provide an adequate recess period for the municipal corporations. With these remarks, Mr. Speaker, I will now take the bill through all the different stages. Clause 1, disclose the title of the bill. Clause 2, amend Section 32 of the Principal Act, where during the month of August, no monthly meetings need to be held. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that with this Section 32 amended, it still gives the local authorities the latitude to hold meetings in August, if so requires, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, with these few remarks, I ask that the bill be read a second time.
Mr. Speaker, this bill itself, the amendment is not controversial. And the minister created some controversy last year about the councils going on recess. But we want to know, like ourselves, that the month of August is used to touch base with your constituents, and certainly it is an important amendment to not only to see to deal with your constituents, but also with your family. But, Mr. Speaker, there are two municipal corporations which I think would probably shouldn't get any recess this August. I speak in particular of Clarendon and St. James. But the country is facing a problem of rat infestation and leptospirosis in Clarendon, resulting in 2 deaths. So therefore, I'm saying that while we support, you know, you could use $8 million to get rid of a lot of rats, you know. So, you know what I mean? So, look, I'm saying that, Mr. Speaker, the $15 million is available to St. James, and I think the health of the people of St. James is critical. So, Mr. Speaker, in supporting the proposal, and of course, within it, it does not prevent any municipal corporation from meeting. We ask these two municipal corporations in particular to ensure that the health of the parish, the citizens of the parish, is paramount as they go forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
The amendment being proposed by the Honourable Minister is worthy for consideration because the councillors, as they discharge their responsibilities, the month of August, they normally do a recess, and it is better that we align the actions with the law and the law with the actions to allow the councillors the break which other bodies do have. However, it must also be noted
that the councillors, being members of the parish disaster committees, are always still on call. So if there is an issue, they would come back to council, as happened when they take the break. So this is an amendment that I would commend to the House, and I would seek all of us to support it, because there can be no argument that our councillors are hardworking and they discharge their responsibility to the community.
Mr. Speaker, I too want to add my voice to the
members, please,
support of this amendment. Mr. Speaker, councillors do not stop working once they are hardworking. They are called upon night and day. And I personally was a little taken aback last year in regard to the minister making some remarks about the break. However, I'm very happy as a former councillor that he has really revisited this amendment to make sure that it is placed in law that the councillors have a right to get a break so that they can continue, not just to get a break for vacation, but that they can continue doing some work in their various divisions.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to just, I just wanted, Mr. Speaker, to have brought this amendment to the Local Governance Act. But I'm afraid I cannot allow the comments of the member from Southwest Clarendon to go unanswered. First of all, Mr. Speaker, he occupied the chair for 4 years. 4 years. Did nothing about it. He knew nothing about it. He never, Mr. Speaker, he never. Mr. Speaker, I objected, Mr. Speaker. No.
Order, please.
No. I have to put him in his place. Mr. Speaker, in trying to gain relevance, Mr. Speaker, in trying to gain relevance, I don't know what is it, or who he's trying to impress. He had his opportunity to do the job when he was the minister, and he has been a dismal failure when he was minister of local government. And now, Mr. Speaker, we have now taken local governance to a different level. We are improving the standards under which the local authorities operate. He's talking about an infestation of rats. Mr. Speaker, it is not the failure of garbage collection. I would urge you to reflect on the years that you served as Minister of Local Government and ask, where is the contribution? What have you done to improve local government? Mr. Speaker, on that score, Mr. Speaker.
Minister McKenzie. Minister.
You're a failure. You're a disaster.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
You're a failure. You're a monumental disaster.
Members, don't allow me to stand. Don't allow me to stand, please.
You're a failure.
Mr. Ascott, I'm going to call you for the last time. And I'm going to ask if you wish to address the floor. I'll ask the minister to sit down and let you do so. And I wish to hear
Speaker,
the minister. Mr.
In response to the member from St. Catherine, the reason why I made the comments last year is because the approach that the local authorities were taken was the wrong approach. The law did not require that. There was nowhere in the law that says you can take recess by virtue of moving a resolution. I made the commitment last year to correct it, and it is my privilege, Mr. Speaker, to present it now to this Honourable House, Mr. Speaker.
The question is, members, Minister Mackenzie.
Mr. Speaker, I beg for second reading of the bill.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Further Amend the Local Governance Act read a second time.
Members, please, please. Members. You ready, Bill? Have you read the bill? Have you read it? Members, the House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Amendments. Clause 1 of an amendment. I put clause 1. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 2 of an amendment. Minister, I understand that we have a correction. Put clause 2. I put clause 2. Those in favor? Those against? Yes, have it. I put the title. I put the title and enacting clause.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask to make a slight amendment. The title to remove the word further, so it would read an act to amend the Local Governance Act. And further down in the short title, to remove number 2, and it would read Act 2017.
Okay. We now then put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. The question is that I do report that the bill having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. Members, I do report that the bill having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister. Minister. You don't ask the bill be read a third time.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Local Governance Act, read a third time and passed.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance will now take the bauxite withdrawal order.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question is that there be a suspension of the standing order. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the matter relates to withdrawal order number 1 under the Bauxite Production Levy Act and the Capital Development Fund. And it relates to budgetary support to the Jamaica Bauxite Institute and fees payable to the Development Bank of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, the Jamaica Bauxite Institute has been receiving budgetary support from the Capital Development Fund, and the amount applicable for the 2017-18 financial year is $223 million. This figure of $223 million being requested represents 86% of the $259 million required for operating expenses and capital expenditure in 2017-18. Cabinet, by way of decision dated May 20, 2013, approved the repayment of obligations to Glencore of United States $33.8 million plus interest through authorized withdrawal orders from the CDF, and a one-off payment by the Jamaica Bauxite Mining of $4 million US. The obligation to Glencore arose from the divestment of the Jamaica Bauxite Mining's bauxite segment to the West Indies Alumina Company, Windalco, which resulted in the termination of a supply agreement between JBM and Glencore, and consequently JBM's failure to fulfill its supply quota. All obligations of the government have been settled in accordance with the commitment letter between the government of Jamaica and the Jamaica Bauxite Mining and Glencore, and the final payment was made in January of this year. During 2015, JBM was requested to advance a total of $487.37 million to Glencore AG on behalf of the government of Jamaica towards the April 30, 2015 quarterly payment of US $3 million, or at that time Jamaican $346 million, and to clear prior advances made by the Accountant General of $141 million. The requests were made due to insufficient funds in the CDF. The advance by JBM has created a gap in the cash resources needed to finance its operating and the capital programs, which incidentally include the planned refurbishment of the wharf in St. Anne. The DBJ provides administrative services to the CDF for which a management fee is charged. Management fees totaling $2 million is due to the DBJ for the last 4 financial years. And the DBJ also engaged the Auditor General's Department to undertake the audit of the CDF for the 10-year period 04-05 to 13-14. The DBJ is now to be reimbursed $3.32 million for the payment of the AGD's fees. So, Mr. Speaker, given the foregoing, it is proposed that the following withdrawals be made from the CDF in line with the Bauxite Production Levy Act. Budgetary support of $223 million for the Jamaica Bauxite Institute. Reimbursement to the Jamaica Bauxite Mining of $487.37 million for advance payments made to Glencore AG on behalf of the government in 2015-16. And the balance of $5.32 million to be paid to the Development Bank of Jamaica in accordance with, and I think that total to be paid out, Mr. Speaker, is some $715 million. We seek the approval of the House for this withdrawal.
Mr. Speaker, there is no objection to the withdrawals from the Capital Development Fund, which is being sought by the Honourable Minister of Finance. As he has said, what is being sought is an authorization for a total withdrawal of some $715,687,316. There's a larger set of issues which I think affects all of us in the House, Mr. Speaker, and that is where does the industry as a whole go? There's no doubt that the bauxite industry has sustained Jamaica over many, many decades. It has been with us from the late 1940s. We have had various occasions when we have sought to enhance our earnings from the industry. Perhaps the most glorious period in our history in relation to this industry was when Jamaica, small as we are, confronted the biggest multinationals in the world in the 1970s in an effort to secure the bauxite levy, which gave significant increase to the revenue flows coming to the government of Jamaica by virtue of this. One of the good parts of the story of bauxite was that Jamaica set up the Capital Development Fund towards the end of the 70s in order to take the resources from the bauxite levy and devote it to capital investment which was going to stimulate growth in the country. Sadly, for a combination of reasons, successive administrations have had to use these resources for housekeeping, budgetary support. And so Jamaica went from one of the earliest countries to, in effect, establish what is now known as a sovereign wealth fund. We were one of the first to having a fund which has been depleted because debt has caused us to simply use the money for day-to-day budgetary support. And now we are at the point, Mr. Speaker, not unique, but I could not help but notice that the resolution, the act that is before us, calls for the withdrawal of funds as has been specified by the minister, but it includes the phrase subject to the liquidity of the fund and the conditions specified in Part 3. In effect, that phrase captures the uncertainty which now exists regarding even the amounts of money that will flow into the Capital Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, I am not here trying to point finger in any direction. Simply to say that in the current circumstances where bauxite still represents the second or third major source of foreign exchange inflows, in light of the mounting uncertainties in the marketplace, in light of the uncertainty caused by the cessation by virtue of government policy of the bauxite levy, we need to, we in this parliament and with clear statements that should be forthcoming from the government, need to take stock as to the future of this industry and our expectations of it. The industry is at a crossroads. The earnings are uncertain. We are still not clear, Mr. Speaker, although it has been said here many times, what is the policy in relation to the bauxite levy? Are we abandoning it totally? Because right now, one company that is
just beginning in Alpat, Gisco, has no levy attached to it. Not complaining, just making the observation. Noranda, a second company, has had, we are told that there is no levy that applies by virtue of government policy. Those who are in the House during the budget debate and standing finance committee will recall that there was a difference of view, and I dare say of understanding, if that's not too euphemistic a term. But there was a difference of view between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Mining. That doesn't, we don't need to have that detain us here. But that suffice it to say that that company, New Day, I believe is the name, has no levy. We are told profit sharing, but profit sharing won't satisfy the public purse because you don't know what the profit is likely to be. But we know and can determine, and there are projections, what the price of aluminum on the London Metal Exchange is, and we could calculate what is due to us as a country. A third company, UC Russell, we are told has had 100% remission of the levy, which leaves 1 of 4 cap, which is not paying. So they don't have any levy either. So the question to be asked, after the glorious beginning of the bauxite levy, are we to bury the levy? Are we witnessing the end? Is this heading of the bauxite levy act? Are we just seeing what they would say, dead man walking? A dead act, just waiting for burial. We need to consider, Mr. Speaker. The House needs to consider, the government needs to advise, the country needs to decide. It is a depleting resource. It will not last forever. Arising from that, I have a question specifically for the minister. It has long been the practice. It has long been the practice to take some of the resources from the levy through JBI, through JBI, to devote exclusively for the use of communities, such as Moko in your constituency, Mr. Speaker, communities and others where the mining takes place. They are being left with literally holes in the ground, and the intention has been, again through successive administrations, that the communities that are being, from which the resources being taken, ought to receive tangible benefit, whether in schools or roads or community centers or playfields. Even with what has been done, I am certain that every member of parliament who has been a beneficiary under this would insist that they have not got enough. Their communities have not got enough to compensate for the dislocation, the environmental damage that the communities have suffered over the years, spreading all the way through Manchester, St. Elizabeth, Clarendon, St. Anne, St. Catherine, in all of these areas. What proportion of this money, if any, is going to those communities? Are there resources in the fund to enable that? I suspect not, and even if any, it is much less than was the case before.
So what then can the bauxite producing areas expect to come from this continued mining in their communities? Are they to just recognize that nothing is going to come of it to them? Are we satisfied as a country that we are maximizing the earnings from this industry? Are we satisfied that given the change in the global marketplace, there is a future for the industry? The parliament just can't come here and every day vote yes without us asking what is in our future, Mr. Speaker, in relation to this industry. We are being told now, and that there is a decision pending regarding the boundaries of the cockpit country. Because this national environmental treasure needs to be defined, because the companies, and again, it is an issue that has existed before this administration. It is there now. But all of us are going to be affected by it. What arises is that we need to know what the boundaries are of the cockpit country, and we need to know why the boundaries that are being recommended are being chosen. But the issue goes further, because there is a fundamental issue. Whatever the boundaries that we choose, it is going to involve an encroachment into spaces, geographic areas, locations, which up to now have not been touched, which companies want to mine, and which are a fundamental part of our environmental inheritance in the country. Even when the government decides what areas, the country has to decide what price are we prepared to pay to allow mining, and at what cost. We need to know, we need to decide these things. When companies come and go, we hope that we here and our generations will be here forever, Mr. Speaker, because it's our yard, it's our home, our country, and any future in it belongs to us as a people. And we may be just whistling past the graveyard of our own future in relation to this. If we permit mining to take place in this area, are we going to, what is the policy? Is there a reversal of the policy that says that we should aim at maximizing the refining of alumina, so that we're not just digging a hole in the ground and sending out at low cost and low return to Jamaica the bauxite, and when you drive past St. Ann for the future, Northwest and other areas, what you're going to be seeing? Just a hole in the ground. People displaced, come to town to live in substandard ghetto conditions, no money to come because we have adjusted the taxation regime. Mr. Speaker, it may not, the minister may not be prepared right now for all these questions. Those that he can satisfy us with, he should. But I'm asking that this House be put in a position as quickly as possible to have the debates about the future of this industry and its implications for the future of the Jamaican people, who really want a better standard of life, but are finding that this industry is making a smaller and smaller contribution overall, despite the positive developments that are taking place in St. Elizabeth with the reopening of Alpat, which we applauded. In fact, we have to applaud it because we started the process. But in more and more communities across the country, and which is significant, the Jamaican people are saying all they are experiencing is hazard, environmental hazard, without commensurate benefit. Loss of long-term livelihood in areas like farming. Yes, there are some bauxite jobs. Yes, it is the case that the differential between bauxite level wages, like when I was a youngster in Monique, and the rest of the wages, that differential has disappeared. Bauxite workers used to be high-wage workers. That's no longer. What are we receiving, Mr. Speaker? We need to know, and we need to find common cause about how we can maximize the earnings from our industry. Mr. Speaker, I end where I began. We have no objection to the withdrawals, but we need to ask some fundamental questions about the future of the industry and the benefits to the people of Jamaica. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Philip Paulwell.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to make a brief comment in line with what the leader of the opposition has said, because yes,
Order, please.
Because, Mr. Speaker, in 2015, a major project was being developed, and this was to enable a national consultation on the mining sector generally, but in particular in the bauxite alumina sector, because it was felt that the country needed to understand, to appreciate, to come to terms with some of the fundamental issues affecting mining. In fact, in my sectoral presentation this year, and in some remarks I made recently at Alpat, I again call on the government to get a discussion going, not interminably, but to enable us to be frank, because in every country there is this natural tension between the communities and the mining sector. And there is not an appreciation, in fact there's a complete ambivalence as to the real contribution of mining, and we really do need to pause to analyze it and to be assured that there is real benefits flowing now. It's undeniable that in the 60s, when we were fledgling, when it became the major center point of our industrialization, then it did contribute. But I think now, Mr. Speaker, it is important for us to have that dialogue. There are issues, environmental issues. You have related to the industry, energy issues that are not as important as it used to be some years ago, but will be relevant. You have the issue, as the leader of the opposition has mentioned, of the cockpit country, where it was our intention to ban and to make an order for the banning of any mining in that area once the boundaries are determined. So, Mr. Speaker, I am again calling for this national consultation. And of course, it must end here in the Parliament, where an open and frank discussion can take place, again recognizing that the bauxite levy regime has been put on hold for 5 years. How will the country benefit from this depleting, diminishing resource? So I again put that on the table, Mr. Speaker, while we support this move.
Mr. Bunting.
Mr. Speaker, once again, if only for posterity, I feel obliged as a member of Parliament who represents one of the constituencies that have been impacted most severely by the activities of the bauxite alumina companies. Central Manchester has suffered mining, processing, and we have the legacy of the mud lake. I am a skeptic about that there's a positive cost-benefit analysis, that the benefits outweigh the cost in today's world. There may have been a time when the industry was, commanding huge levies, etc. But now we've basically given almost everything away just on the assumption that it is a good thing. And I believe it is imperative that at this time we get some study done which balances the long-term environmental costs, which looks to some of the issues in terms of the practice, not just the theory, some of the issues, for example, raised by the member from Central Kingston in motion 12 on the order paper, which speaks to the extent to which the restored mined-out lands have been put to any productive agricultural purpose, or are indeed capable of being put to productive agricultural purpose. When we look at the cases, the real cases, not theoretical, of companies going bankrupt or otherwise suddenly ceasing operations in Jamaica, with years of obligations for restoration outstanding, we realize this is not theoretical, this is a real risk. And as the leader of the opposition pointed out, the benefits have been diminishing. Even not only have the jobs in terms of the premium that bauxite jobs once commanded diminished, but even the numbers of jobs for Jamaicans. I can tell you, one of the main benefits that we're seeing now from the reopening of Alpart is accommodation and lodging for scores of Chinese who have been brought in to get the plant restarted. So we're not even benefiting from those jobs, but those jobs are being filled by expatriates. The final thing on which the minister, in fact, everyone agrees to, for the last 10 years that I've been raising this issue, why not, as the companies mine the lands, process the bauxite and export either alumina or in some cases the raw ore, why aren't they obliged to put the funds for restoration in some sort of escrow account? That no matter what happens, that those funds will be available. If the company goes bankrupt, if they are renegade and they just close overnight and leave, at least the Jamaica Bauxite Institute or some environmental body would have some resources left. And there's no excuse for us to be carrying this unfunded liability, this liability of the bauxite companies, which is, we have no asset, we have no fund to make good on if they pick up themselves and leave overnight, which we have seen before. We have renegotiated the agreements many times to give them concessions. Why don't we ask for these concessions, these variations, which would be in favor of our children and grandchildren? Because these are negotiated frequently to extend the exemptions from the levy, to reduce, to shift to profit sharing, whatever it is. So, I have made this point ad nauseum every year, sometimes twice a year. Everybody agrees, but there's no action on it. And I, once again, plead that we look at a very minimum, doing two things. One, the next time any of these agreements come up for variation, that we put that clause in there, that as the bauxite is mined and sold and revenue is earned, something is put into an escrow account to making whole the environmental damage that is being done through the mining and processing. And secondly, that we get a study done. After 60 years of bauxite mining, 60 or more years of bauxite mining and processing in Jamaica, we don't have one longitudinal study, for example, on the health effects of the mining and the processing on the communities surrounding these operations. Not one. And I think we should be embarrassed as a parliament and as successive administrations that we have not ensured that things like that are done routinely. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Stewart and then Dr. Falk and then Mr. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak on behalf of the citizens of South Manchester, and in particular as it relates to the removal of the bauxite levy. As member from Central Manchester spoke about the 60 years of bauxite mining, and the residents in South Manchester have not seen any requisite performance as relates to compensation, as it relates to infrastructural development. We have the worst set of type of roads, the poorest water supply in South Manchester after the bauxite company has been mining for years. And the residents are a little bit weary of the bauxite level being taken away. What will be given to them? What will they get? When you traverse the landscape in South Manchester and see the devastation that has taken place, the farmers have been impacted in a very negative way. The livestock, there is no place to plant grass for foodstuff, nothing at all. How will they be compensated? In the next 3 to 5 years, we are seeing where the equipment will be gone, the landscape will be denuded, will be left denuded, the environmental impact will be great on the farmers there, on the citizens there. I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister, that we believe that we need to have something in place for the citizens of South Manchester as it relates to getting something reasonable for them, so that when the bauxite mining is completed there, they will have some legacy project to show, whether it is in road, whether it is in water supply, that something will be there for the citizens of South Manchester. And I ask that due consideration be given to these poor citizens in that part of the constituency. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Chang. Dr. Chang. Minister Chang. And then.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am not in the bauxite mining community, but bauxite is something that affects the entire country. But I would be remiss if I did not make a few comments on the present debate, given the points raised by our colleagues, especially as it relates to environmental factors affecting the industry. The debate on the impact of the environment has been around since the beginning of bauxite. But it has been some time, and circumstances and times have changed. And you're at a point too where the bauxite industry has matured, and you're beginning to approach areas that raise greater environmental issues. And the issue of the mining in and around the areas defined the cockpit country is a significant question, a major one. And I think it's appropriate that I make some comment on this, because the cockpit country is indeed a unique environmental area in Jamaica, and in fact in the world. It's that there are 2 or 3 places that have this kind of karstic limestone. One should bear in mind, Mr. Speaker, that bauxite is essentially mineral that is formed on top of limestone throughout the world, essentially. Sometime between layers of limestone in other areas in Jamaica on top of limestone. When you take the topsoil off, you get bauxite soil, and makes it easy to mine, and it's one of the advantages of mining in Jamaica, and what made Jamaica one of the principal suppliers of bauxite for many years. they have identified elsewhere in large quantities. I say that to point out that in the cockpit area and the areas of which is a particular karstic limestone formation, it's really like an upside-down egg box, and essentially bauxite deposited in the areas despite the cockpits. Now, the cockpit countries, however, like the lung of one side, the left lung of Jamaica, if you're looking from the north, it provides the environmental area where you get significant rainfall. A lot of our water supply comes out of that. Because you bear in mind that the rainfall in Jamaica depends on a number of factors, including surface temperature. And therefore, forest cover is important. In the eastern bloc, much of our rain comes from the rising trade winds and the North Atlantic systems, which when it reaches the northern part of Jamaica, rises over the Blue Mountain, it cools and you get rainfall. And therefore, Portland in the world has one of the highest levels of rainfall. Some of that moisture even goes by wind through the northeast trade into the west. But over the cockpit country, in addition, the forest cover provides a certain cooling, not height in this case, of the surface temperature, and you get rainfall deposits there. And much of our water supply in that region evolves out of the cockpit country. In fact, there are a significant number of underground channels. Something like a river like the Rabiano actually starts somewhere up in the North Clarendon. By dye tracing, you can trace from somewhere. I think there's a mountain up in the top northern Clarendon, into the Cave River and the Quash River in southern Trelawney. Water goes through to the Rabiano River, which have one of the highest consistent flow in the entire island, and in the long term is potentially one of our most reliable sources of water. The Martha Bay supply comes out of the cockpit country. The Black River comes out of the cockpit country. And a number of other rivers and streams all emerges from areas that could be defined as cockpit country. Of course, these facts are not disputed by anyone. What is now debatable and has been around for some time, and without drawing lines, we should have made that decision some time ago. And it is not no matter of this side or that side, but the recommendations and debate have been on the table for some time, I think from early, maybe as early as 2005, 2006. And we have, quite frankly, delayed them too long. If we had taken the decision earlier, we would not have some debate today. But a decision will have to be taken. And I said the boundary is what's the dispute, because how you define the boundary will determine the impact on the environmental factors we're alluding to, in terms of surface temperature, rainfall, flows into the underground catchment areas that provide the supply to the rivers referred to. And bear in mind, in all of this, it's not just the impact on where the water is under the fork, so to speak, or the damage to underground flow streams. When you have forest cover and rain falls, it forms a kind of sieve that it holds some of the water and releases it slowly so that the flow into the streams is consistent over time. So in the dry season, you have satisfactory flow as well as in the rainy season. Without good forest cover and grass cover, you end up with flooding and erosion and ponding, all of which reduces the flow to your rivers. So I mentioned these points that the government recognized this. And in going forward, while the decision is not yet taken, all of these factors will be considered. And the best advice available will be reviewed and respected and recognized in going forward. The National Environmental Planning Agency have made recommendations. The Forest Department have done studies and made recommendations. The University of the West Indies have done so. The cockpit country stakeholders are an important group of citizens who have taken a keen and sincere interest in the cockpit area for both their own economic as well as the country's environmental reasons. And there are various individuals and international groupings that are there and making recommendations which the government will take into consideration, and if necessary, get required review of studies, and if new studies are necessary, so to do. But the best expert advice will be viewed and a considered national decision taken in the interest of the country and all concerned. Of course, when that recommendation is made by Cabinet, the Parliament will be brought to the picture and will debate the issue, because the impact will have long-term effect on the entire country, on all our people. It's not a light decision, and it's therefore not one that will be taken in any non-transparent and ad hoc way by this government. And I thought that definitely there will be discussion. There has been many discussions, much consultation, and there will be no secretive decision, Mr. Member from Central Manchester. Let me repeat. This government is not in the business of disregarding either the environmental lobbyists or the interests of the country in making the decision. And there will be discussion. So let me just assure you of all of that. This decision, as it regards the environment, will be well considered, and the Parliament will be allowed to participate in the final word. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Scott.
Mr. Speaker, I know you can't speak here in this debate, but certainly your constituency has been one that has been affected significantly over the years by mining. Likewise, southeast Clarendon, southwest Clarendon, even central Clarendon. Mocha was a breadbasket of Clarendon. Now it's pure devastation. And Mr. Speaker, bauxite mining has not been good to us in that part of Clarendon. And as we speak, trucks continue to haul bauxite by road, but the road conditions, especially the main road, and the Minister of Finance must have driven on that road and see the state of the road between Poros and Maypen. And the continuous use of the road by these heavy trucks hauling bauxite to the plant in Jamaica. The environmental impact of the citizens of the entire southern belt from the fallout from the alumina plant without compensation. The relocation of persons from Moko and other places to areas where many generations have passed and still no titles. We have areas like Dembicroll, for example. The people cannot get the titles. The roads are in a deplorable condition. And every time we try to meet with the bauxite company, they say they are trying to work through LAMP or with the government. Fact of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that the people of Clarendon have continued to suffer, and we need some attention to be paid, because while we are giving so much concession to the bauxite and mining companies, our people are being negatively impacted by the mining activities. So I'm saying that we are at a place where I believe we need now to set aside some priority with the funds. We need to maintain the infrastructure. We need to get the titles for those persons relocated. And we need to fix the roads for those persons who have been relocated. Thank you very much.
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have had several interventions, and I thank the members for their observations. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to give any lengthy response to the issues that have been raised, but there are some points, I think, that in the interest of public, of accuracy and public information, I do feel obliged to discuss some of the issues that have been raised. First of all, Mr. Speaker, there can be no doubt whatsoever. There can be no doubt whatsoever, Mr. Speaker, that the bauxite industry continues to be an important industry for the economy of Jamaica. There's no question about that. And it is to be admitted that in relation to the bauxite levy easement. As the former Minister of Finance knows, this is an issue that crosses the government lines, regardless of who has been over here from time to time, and that these requests for easement of the levy have come on occasions with the declining fortunes of the industry as a whole. And so I readily agree that we have to seek to get the levy back on track as soon as possible. And I want to give the country the assurance that the government has not abandoned the levy program. In fact, had we abandoned it, then in the recent negotiations that started with the previous government and we completed, we have not given GISCO any open-ended commitment to the absence of levy for any, into infinity. In fact, there has been a 5-year period that has been placed on the issue of the levy with GISCO. So the question is, Mr. Speaker, these are issues that we have had to contend with in terms of balancing what correctly is noted as a depleting national resource. What is a depleting national resource? What is a depleting national resource, Mr. Speaker? With the need for us to get economic growth going once again. And so I am sure that it was not the intention of either the leader of the opposition or the member from Central Manchester to seek to imply in any way that the investment by the Jingguan Steel Company of China, GISCO, at Alpart, that should not, in fact, that should not in any way, the importance of it cannot be undermined in any way whatsoever. And let's remind ourselves what it is. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, there are 1,000 people working at Alpart. 1,000 people. And of that 1,000 people, yes, about 200 of them are from China. But that means that 800 Jamaicans who are out of jobs are now in jobs at Alpart. 800 Jamaican workers. Equally, Mr. Speaker, we must not forget the significance of this investment. That the company has committed to more than double the capacity by building a new state-of-the-art plant that will have another 2 million metric tons of alumina being produced at GISCO, in Alpart. In addition to that, the company has also committed, the company has also committed to producing, using intermediate raw materials coming back from China. They have committed also to producing aluminum foil for sale into the Western Hemisphere. So that alone, Mr. Speaker, when all of these projects come to maturity over the next couple of years, we'll be looking at an incremental 2.5 billion United States dollars invested and over 3,000 Jamaican people working in those factories. So, Mr. Speaker, it is not, the importance of that investment should not in any way be underestimated. Now, I want to say to the Leader of the Opposition that we still continue to earn a nominal amount from the bauxite levy, because the issue, for instance, with the New Day, there is something unique with the New Day arrangement. Unlike the companies that have the value added in alumina production, we decided that in the case of New Day, it is only a portion of the arrangement that we would allocate towards profit sharing. So there is still an amount being earned from New Day in terms of bauxite, in terms of the bauxite levy. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, I can indicate that New Day has paid up for the period up to November 2016 to March 2017, a total of 1.8 million and another 1.2 million, all United States dollars, that was paid on the 14th of July. And in fact, the amount that is now in the Capital Development Fund is some 1.589 billion Jamaican dollars. Of course, when the 715 million is taken out, it will leave another $874 million will remain in the Capital Development Fund. And we are taking on board the need to have discussions. The Minister with responsibility is not here at this time, but we are going to be having discussions with the Jamaica Bauxite Institute with a view to taking an allocation for those bauxite-dependent communities. Some money can be taken out of that towards special programs. And I give the House the commitment that I'm going to be looking into that along with the appropriate minister. Pardon me? Yes, I'm going to speak to that because that is something that is very, very, very close to my heart. I want to say in respect of land reclamation that both of us, both governments, and we are told by the former minister that 61 years of bauxite mining in Jamaica. And we both have to accept responsibility for not having insisted, because it's not a matter of the absence of laws, you know. The laws are there on land reclamation. It's the enforcement of the law that has been the problem. The lack of enforcement of the laws that has been the problem. And I want to say that this is an area that we have to, we have been talking about it. As a matter of fact, leader of the opposition, when I went on that visit to China and met with Driscoll, because as you know, they have an agricultural component to their operations in the Gansu province, where their operations, which go as far as aluminum, coexist with agriculture, with grape vineyards and a range of vegetables and fruits. They coexist. And so to coexist, they know about land reclamation. And therefore, we are going to be requiring from them the same levels of land reclamation they produce on reclaimed land in China at high levels of productivity. So here is a company that already knows what it's about, showing how agriculture can successfully coexist with mining and reclamation of the land. And that is something that we are going to be working with. So, Mr. Speaker, that I want to give the member from Central Kingston every assurance that we might call it better late than never, right? Because not only should we be looking at reclaiming the lands that are now being mined and will be mined over the next few years, my own view is that we must look to the day when we go back to those lands, fly over St. Anne and see all of that unreclaimed land, and it is really a disgrace. And small farmers are looking for land to produce things in this country. It is something that we have to put on our agenda. The member from Central Manchester is not here, but I think the idea of an escrow account, taking money that is due for land reclamation and putting it into an escrow account. And this is perhaps what the Jamaica Bauxite Mining or the Jamaica Bauxite Institute should be using a good amount of their own quality time and ensuring that we have that escrow account and we have the land reclamation taking place. I think it's a good idea, and we are going to, I'm commending it to the government, we are going to take it on board. So, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot that we could say, and the issues are, yes, controversial in terms of the levy itself. But ultimately, there's a responsibility and a burden on the government to make decisions that on balance, for now, will redound to the mutual benefit of everyone. There have been mistakes made along the way, and we don't have to do an excavation of everything. But in this particular drawdown, Mr. Speaker, yes, I know you want the future, but I just thought I'd mention that in this particular drawdown, reference has been made to a residual United States $33 million that was owed to Glencore of the United States or wherever they are from. And Mr. Speaker, that's a part of the problem that militated against the industry, where because of a bad agreement with a foreign company, where we agreed and had a fixed price for alumina, even as the price of energy was climbing all over globally, we had to end up paying between 400 and 500 million United States dollars, mostly from the Capital Development Fund, not to develop our capital in Jamaica and our lands and so on, but rather to put into the hands of a company for which we had given a guaranteed price and could not hold to it because of the high cost of production. I'm talking about the failed Glencore deal that dug deeply into the resources of the Capital Development Fund. But as the leader of the opposition would prefer that we speak about the future rather than the past. Yes, in fact, in relation to bauxite, here's how long past it is. Of the past 61 years of the bauxite industry and all its ups and downs. The opposition, former government, has been in charge of the country for 37 years out of it. We have been in charge of the country for 24 years out of it. 13 more years you had to fix the bauxite industry and you never did it. But you don't want to talk about the history, so we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. We don't bother going any deeper in the history. Mr. Speaker, I beg for the approval. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the approval of this order.
The question is for the approval of the motion. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Justice will now move. Hold on.
I know the leader of the opposition wants to leave and just wanted to deal with a matter which he might have a question on. But it's a short matter, Mr. Speaker. It's the Licenses on Trade and Business Validation, Indemnification and Amendment Act 2017. Mr. Speaker, I now ask for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take first reading and second reading of the bill, shortly entitled this Licenses on Trade and Business Validation, Indemnification and Amendment Act 2017, and for me to take it through all its concluding stages.
Those in favor? Those against? Yes, have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask for first reading of the bill.
A bill shortly entitled License on Trades and Business Validation, Indemnification and Amendment Act 2017 for the first time.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable House may recall
second
I have to
reading of
move
the bill.
on. Mr. Speaker, I now move for second reading of the bill. Give notice. I give notice of second reading of the bill. Mr. Speaker, this Honourable House may recall that in 2015, under the previous administration, the trade and business license duties were significantly increased. The provisional order in respect of those increases was confirmed by the House on October 6, 2015, and was given a 3-month extension by resolution of this House on October 13, 2015. Notwithstanding Tax Administration Jamaica taking all the necessary steps to ensure that the requisite legislation was prepared during the life of the order, because of delays in the legislative process, the order expired in December 2015. The bill which is under consideration is to give permanent effect to those increases, as well as to validate the collections that would have taken place since the expiry of the provisional order to the time the bill takes effect. Hence, Mr. Speaker, the validation and indemnification provisions included in the bill. Mr. Speaker, there was a range of increases, and I don't think I really need to go over the increases in the trade licenses. It can be admitted that at the time of the increases, the licenses were at a very, very low level, and so those increases are now institutionalized and are put in place. And so the purpose of this bill is simply to now, Mr. Speaker, formalize the licenses on trade and to validate it and to indemnify the tax administration from not having us taken this before, and I seek the approval of the House for this bill, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move for second reading of the bill. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for second reading of the bill. Thank you.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm as Lawful the Imposition, Variation and Renewal of Tax under the Licenses on Trade and Business Act by an order made pursuant to Section 3 of the Provisional Collection of Tax Act, the collection of the tax in good faith during the period commencing on the 30th day of December 2015 and ending on the day of coming into operation of this act, to indemnify the government and persons acting on behalf of the government from liability in relation to the imposition, variation and collection of tax, to amend licenses on Trades and Business Act and for connected matters. Read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Mr. Chairman, could I, since there are no amendments, can I propose that the bill be taken en bloc, sir?
I put clause 1 to 17. Those in favor? Those against? As of it.
No, and then put the preamble. Here.
I put the preamble. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for third reading of the bill.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm as Lawful the Imposition, Variation and Renewal of Tax under the Licenses on Trades and Business Act by an order made pursuant to Section 3 of the Provisional Collection of Tax Act. The collection of the tax in good faith during the period commencing on the 30th day of December 2015 and ending on the date of coming into operation of this Act. To indemnify the government and persons acting on behalf of the government from liability in relation to the imposition, variation and collection of tax, to amend the Licenses on Trades and Business Act and for connected matters read a third time and passed.
Mr. Speaker, may I speak from a seat other than my own? Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business for today. I therefore ask that the Honourable House be adjourned to next week, Tuesday, the 25th at 2 p.m.
The member Attorney General is acting as House Leader and does not need permission at this stage. The question is that the House be adjourned until next week, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? As have it. This Honourable House now stands adjourned.
Because you see me on the corner, you are going to abuse me.
I have a life to live. I deserve to be heard and respected. But know my rights. Do you? Know your laws. Know your rights. Respect you.